And and I came here with the thought I play golf weekends and Mondays and Wednesdays. I don't even get close to playing on Mondays and Wednesdays anymore because I fell in love with what I'm doing. The legal profession has been amazing to me. I've loved it. I've loved the people I've met and known, the clients I've helped, but it's become a really difficult profession. And I knew that I had a lot of experience. I've done so many things wrong. It's actually how I feel I learn. We learn is from doing things wrong. Our dog learns how to sit from the times we tell him to sit, and he doesn't sit. And we correct him enough, oh, then he gets it. And that was me. I learned from all the mistakes I made and feel like that's what makes me a little different from others in my space. I practiced law a long time, and I've had all those same experiences that other lawyers have.
Hi, and welcome again to another episode of the Trustcast Show. And we're really excited to have Gary Miles with us. And Gary Miles spent 46 years as a trial lawyer and managing partner. He ranked first in his high school, college, and law school classes, clerked in federal court, and built a firm he ran for 3 decades. Then he realized the same perfectionism that made him successful was quietly destroying his life, and we're going to talk about that. So he created something called the Free Lawyer Framework to help elite lawyers break free. So here's my opening question. I always like to write down the first one. You were bullied as a kid, became a top student everywhere you went, built a 46-year legal career, and then said the very thing that made you great was also the thing destroying you. What was the moment you realized that?
Yeah, it was somewhere in sort of the middle of my career when I realized I couldn't sleep at night. Sunday nights I was filled with dread. I'd be preparing for a case and I'd be scared to death because I want to make sure everything was perfect. And I just kind of worked through that and realized that my perfectionism had become sort of an obsession, because I wasn't really focusing on the process. I was so fixated on the outcome of a win, of perfection, that I was creating a terrible anxiety and stress. And I learned to instead focus internally on, was I prepared? Did I do a good job? Was I ready? And not worry so much about winning and losing. And when I stopped worrying about winning and losing, I became a much better trial lawyer because I was no longer filled with fear and stress and anxiety.
Do you think that this is a lot of lawyers experience the same thing?
Many, because a lot of what got us there. So, for example, law school is very, very competitive. It's only the best students. They're graded on a curve. You're competing against your friends and classmates to get a higher class rank, and you work your tail off to do that. And then you get in a law firm, and then sort of the same thing keeps going. The harder you work, and when you're trying to please your managing partner, you want to make darn sure there's no mistake. So it just builds and builds and builds. It's a very, very common scenario in the legal profession.
So let me, I'm going to step back a little bit and do a little bit of historical background. Then we're going to talk about the Free Lawyer Framework. So you talked about being an overweight kid with thick glasses who got called names on the playground. How did that kid become a lawyer, rank first in all the way through high school, college, etc., in your law school?
Yeah, well, I was, a nice word is overweight, and a not so nice word was fat. I was fat and a bit geeky and nerdy. But I was also very, very smart. And that combination, at least back then, people don't like the smart kid because it makes them look not as smart. If I got a 98 on the test and the next highest grade was 72, they didn't like the fact that I got a 98. And so I was not popular, particularly at younger ages. I was bullied, but I dealt with that by trying to be as perfect as I could, I figured if I could do really well in school, I'd show them, I'd teach them a lesson, so to speak. And it was a bit of my motivating force, although, as I say, it later became a huge, huge hurdle. So I worked hard, but part of it was my motivation, and it affected me in other ways too. I was a bit of a people pleaser. because I was trying to curry favor, trying to be liked, and that was one way to do that.
So when did you lose the baby fat?
Well, now I weigh less than I did in sixth grade. It happened over time. I weighed 180 pounds in sixth grade, and when I graduated from college, I probably still weighed the same, but I had grown. So it's partly just the thinning out process, and I became much more. Those genes run in my family, but as I became an adult, I became much more focused on healthy eating, exercise. I've always been an avid golfer. I played golf in high school and college and live in Pinehurst, North Carolina now, which if folks are listening know golf. That's a golf place. So I played a lot of golf. I caddied a lot as a kid. I think that had a lot to do with it. Walking 36 holes, carrying two bags. And back then they didn't have these light carry bags that were made out of leather and filled with everything. I think that helped to keep me, slim me down a little.
Yeah. So you were a caddy for a lawyer who was friends with your dad. Your
Yes.
dad wasn't a lawyer, but that's is that what originally got you involved in the idea of, hey, maybe I want to be a lawyer?
No, I originally got involved in the idea I wanted to be a lawyer from my older brother. He and I shared a lot of common interests, academically, athletically. We love sports. We go to the Baltimore Colt games back then. And I sort of followed in my oldest brother's footsteps. So I always knew I was going to become a lawyer. No one in my family played golf. We were middle class to lower middle class. We weren't country club kids, but I started caddying in eighth grade and caddied at Baltimore Country Club, which is kind of the most exclusive club in Baltimore, and met a lawyer who liked me and had me start working with him right after college. I wasn't even in law, hadn't started law school yet when I started working with him as a law clerk, and it was a great opportunity.
So the free lawyer framework, you talk about something called the external authority trap. What is that, and why does it hit high achieving lawyers especially hard?
Yes, it really does, because we are raised in law school, and in the early days of our career to judge ourselves based on our successes, our awards, our compliments from others. Making law review, making something called Order of the Coif, um, um, getting in the top 10% of the class. That's what makes us a good law student. And then we get into our career and winning our first case and getting a compliment from a partner and bringing in a new client. That makes us get recognized. All those things are external. And that's how we are grown and developed as lawyers. And then as we move further along in our career and we have more responsibility, the firm depends on us to bring in clients. Our trial reputation determines whether we get the next good case. And the pressure builds because now it's really, really important to me, my livelihood, and my future. And those compliments from judges, lawyers, clients, having emotion ruled our way can make me feel like I'm successful. And I share often at one point I won 12 straight cases. Now you think two things: I must have been really good and I must have been really confident.
Mm-hmm.
I can't judge the first. The second wasn't true. I lived in fear of losing my next one, because then it's like a trap door that opens and I fall through. And those compliments from people are fleeting. They come and they go. I don't know if you're a football fan, but you win some and lose some. But even if your team is good and trying hard, it's that way in law. And so it can become something that creates such continual anxiety and stress to always need to get your confidence from outside of you because you have no power over that. I may do a great job for you as a client, but you may not appreciate it. You may not say something nice to me. You may get a different lawyer because in some way I displeased you. All of a sudden I feel bad about myself. So instead, I focus on what I call internal authority, focusing on my dedication, my effort, my skills, my commitment to my client, my perseverance. If I put those things forth for a client and I try a case and I lose it, it's okay. My worth as a person, as a lawyer, was not on trial. I'm not a loser if I lose the case. I did a really good job. It didn't work out. And I'm disappointed for my client, and I'm probably disappointed internally, but it doesn't destroy my self-confidence as a lawyer because no longer does that determine who I am.
I can see how that would happen. So walk me through exactly what happens when a 300K plus attorney signs up for your 6 month coaching program. What does session one look?
Well, session one of what is usually more than 12, because people don't seem to stop working with me. Session one is sort of I have an assessment that I use covering the different pillars that I talk about a lot. And we try to identify where that particular lawyer's biggest challenges and hurdles are. Sometimes they know it. Most of the times they don't. Most of the times they're surprised when they do the assessment and actually see what the results are. And then we focus on that particular challenge in the beginning. And by the end, they are able to set boundaries, able to sleep at night, much more relaxed, much happier. I had one client who, in our first session, she broke down crying with me. And I didn't do anything really to evoke that emotion. But she was so overwhelmed with stress, anxiety, a complete and utter lack of confidence in herself. And from the outside, for no good reason, she was incredibly accomplished. 6 months later, she was smiling, laughing, full of joy. It was heartwarming and fulfilling.
So you say your clients go from 70-hour work weeks to 45 or 50 without their results dropping. How's that possible when they're convinced they're the only one holding it all together?
Yeah, they are convinced they're the only ones holding it all together. That's part of the problem. They may be the only ones holding it all together. And it's important to build a team of folks who have skills and training and confidence and some independence and autonomy who can carry on certain functions of the firm. But the other thing is, lawyers are so hesitant to set boundaries because they feel like, and this gets back a little bit to the perfectionism thing, they feel like they need to be constantly available. If you call me at 9 a.m., I better answer the phone. If I get an email at 9:15, I better answer it at 9:16. And the result of that is during the workday, they have no time to get work done. And I have developed kind of a productivity system. I'm actually coming out with a course about it soon. Um, but I've spoken to the ABA and the North Carolina Association of Women Lawyers about how to be more productive at work. It involves planning the evening before and clearing out 2 hours in the morning where you're not interrupted for anything. You don't take calls, you don't take emails, no one pokes their head in your door. You're focused on working for 2 hours. And you work on the one project that you've been putting off the longest, the one that you can't stand, you didn't want to do, it's behind, you procrastinated, and you get it done. And then, you've gotten it done or you made progress on it, you feel better about yourself. And otherwise, what happens is the day becomes reactive. I walk in, I look at emails, I start responding to the emails. Then a call comes in. I take the call. And all of a sudden, the whole day's gone by, and you finish at the end of the day. So I worked my tail off for 10 hours, and I didn't feel like I got a single thing done. And you may not have gotten much done.
So I could see that just about in any field, but it's especially, I imagine, stressful as an attorney because you have so many people that are pulling on you in different ways.
Right.
So one of the things I wrote down here was delegation. So I think is that a problem with some attorneys not wanting to let go of any single task because nobody else can do it because it's so critical, every piece?
Yes, it might be a little overstated the way you said it, but yes, it's a problem. And some of it comes back to what we started with, the concept of perfectionism. The reality is, if I have a junior attorney working for me, I can absolutely do the task better than he can or she can. No question about it. And so I may decide, because I'm so busy, this time I'll do it myself because I can do it better and faster than taking the other attorney and training them how to do it, teaching them, overseeing their work. It took a little longer than it, etc. So we get in a mode where it's easier and quicker for us to do it exactly the way we want it done. And that's makes sense in the moment. It doesn't make sense long term. Because what I've seen is lawyers get to be 55 or 60 and they built a firm where they're absolutely indispensable. And what does that mean? They can't take a vacation. They may not even be able to take a Saturday to see their kid's soccer game. They can't think about transferring their practice to someone else because they don't have systems and people trained who can make it run just as effectively when they're not there as when they're present.
So, what's the most common lie elite attorneys tell themselves that keeps them stuck?
Yes, I just recently did a blog and a podcast called Buried Lies based on the book 7 Days in Utopia, which I highly recommend. It is ostensibly a book about golf, but really it's a book about how we live our lives. There are so many. One is I have to be available 24/7, an absolute lie, but lawyers feel that way. One is if I lose this case, I'm a loser. We're competitive. Lawyers are competitive because they start competing in law school, they compete in their firms. But that's also not true. And there are a lot of them like that. That are if I don't handle every case perfectly, I'm not a good lawyer. If I am not indispensable to my firm, who am I? Who am I as a person? And the trouble is people look at themselves as lawyers instead of as people who practice law, and they can lose their focus.
So, I asked you before we started that you had a dependence on alcohol, and that was
I
a
did.
big thing in your life. And how did that affect your transformation from where you were, or did it affect, or was that a catalyst?
Yeah, I practiced for 12, 13 years as an active alcoholic. Well, I guess I wouldn't say it exactly. I was about 12 or 13 years in my career when I entered recovery. When I became an alcoholic, who can say? But before I did enter recovery, I was so overwhelmed with fear. And when you're a trial lawyer, that's really a bad thing. It's not helpful at all. My fear, though, was much beyond worried about whether I'm going to win this trial. It was really an irrational fear, an excessive and irrational fear of things that weren't scary. Seeing an acquaintance walk down the street, I didn't feel comfortable in being on the side of the street and saying hello and carrying on a conversation. And I'm a very social person. So I had this sort of internal fear that was overwhelming, along with distraction, shame, guilt. I was not able to focus at work. I was very unproductive. And it was a huge transformation, not only in my life, but in my profession. I practice with much more confidence, um, self assurance, openness, accountability. It really transformed not only who I was, but really how I practice law.
So, did people notice the change? Did they ask you about it?
Well, some people certainly noticed a change in my drinking. The other changes happen very, very gradually over time. Um, Somewhat like watching a clock. You could never say you see it move, but you might notice, wow, it's 5 hours later than it was 5 hours ago. It was sort of that kind of thing. I think my dad got sober before I did. He got sober 3 years before me. And I saw the changes in him. We were very, very close, even when he was in his stage of alcoholism. But when he got sober, he reached a new level of kindness and gentleness, peace, calm, serene, and that was very attractive to me. So it's hard to see the changes in yourself, honestly. It's easier to see the changes in other people, and I saw it in him.
So, when you moved to Pinehurst with your wife, Brenda, and stepped back from the firm, did that feel like freedom or like maybe losing some of your identity?
It felt a little bit of both, actually. And it was a little, I was in a state of confusion for a while. I did not come here with the intention of doing what I'm doing now. It evolved. And, but in the beginning, it was my identity. I was a good lawyer. I ran my firm. I had the control over it. It was hard in one sense to let that go. You sell your house and you move out, you come back and well, they changed it. It makes you feel a little uncomfortable. Um, but and And I came here with the thought I'd play golf weekends and Mondays and Wednesdays. I don't even get close to playing on Mondays and Wednesdays anymore because I fell in love with what I'm doing. The legal profession has been amazing to me. I've loved it. I've loved the people I've met and known, the clients I've helped, but it's become a really difficult profession. And I knew that I had a lot of experience. I've done so many things wrong. It's actually how I feel I learn. We learn is from doing things wrong. Our dog learns how to sit from the times we tell him to sit, and he doesn't sit. And we correct him enough, oh, then he gets it. And that was me. I learned from all the mistakes I made and feel like that's what makes me a little different from others in my space. I practiced law a long time, and I've had all those same experiences that other lawyers have had, and I've had them many times over. So I can really relate. I've been there, I've done that, and I've learned from those experiences. And I love now sharing them with others. When I was a lawyer, I loved being a lawyer. Every day I felt some stress. Not to say every day was bad, but every day at some point I felt something stressful. I never feel stress anymore. It's just complete fulfillment. I love working with my clients. They love working with me. I love doing my own podcast, doing my writing, my newsletter on LinkedIn. It's very, very fulfilling.
So do you feel like so you sound like you really do love what you're doing now. So do you feel like that part of your mission is to get someone who is a practicing lawyer? I don't know that you could ever relieve, stress it being an attorney, but do you feel like part of your mission is to transfer some of that joy that you have now, and make that someone who is an attorney able to have that kind of joy in being an attorney and reduce their amount of stress?
Yes, absolutely. And, it's up to the person. Stress is there in whatever we do, and law is inherently stressful. It's stressful in part because it's a competitive profession generally. Not always. If you're in estates, it's not really, you're not in conflict with other attorneys and other parties, but generally the profession is a profession of conflict and stress. But most of our stress is self-created, in part because we worry too much about things we can't control. Um, we may have a managing partner who's difficult and challenging. Well, we can't change that. But yet every day we walk in frustrated that he talks to us the way he does. Or we may have a client who's just terribly demanding and we want to keep working with him and we just can't stand how he speaks to us or how he's always angry or upset. Things like that come up. The other attorney who's a pain. Boy, that's certainly something that happens a lot more now. Opposing attorneys being unfriendly, unprofessional happens a lot. But we have no power over those things. And yet we fixate on them. We worry about them. We resist them. And that resistance creates stress. Instead, just know that's the way it is. That's the way that person is and respond accordingly, however that may be. And I actually coach some of my litigators on how to respond to the nasty attorney on the other side when he's acting nasty. And that's the first step, is not get emotional, not get angry, and just be factual and realize that's that person's problem, not my problem.
So I was just talking to an attorney yesterday, an interesting fellow, and he was talking about how he doesn't get emotional, and that he sees that as such a weakness for a client, that when he sees another attorney become emotional, that he will actually, I mean, I hate to say use it against them, but that really misrepresents what their, or it weakens their ability to represent their client.
Yeah, my approach, if I was, and I've been in depositions where there might be three parties, and I see the other two attorneys. One raises his voice, the other raises his voice louder. They start interrupting each other. They start waving their arms. It's like this is craziness. What I would do when a lawyer would be like that with me is just let him go. If he's going to yell and scream, I just let him go until he stops. And then I say, may I speak? And the louder he gets, the softer I make my voice, purposely. The faster he speaks, the slower I speak. And I don't ever engage in you're a jerk, name calling. Let's talk about the facts at hand. Let's talk about this issue. That's all I want to address. And it's hard to have a fight by yourself. And it diffuses the lawyer very, very much.
Right. So rapid fire. I got, 5 or 6 questions just for fun. So first thing you do every morning.
Get up and get a cup of coffee for me and my wife.
Favorite golf course in Pinehurst.
Well, we live on Pinehurst number 9, so I have to pick that. It's beautiful, Jack Nicklaus course, and we just love it. And it's right out our back door, so it couldn't be much more convenient.
Most overrated piece of advice given to lawyers.
Wow. Just work harder. Just work harder.
That's a good one. A book every attorney should read that has nothing to do with law.
Everyday Legacy by Cody Huesman. And it's about, instead of how much are we going to leave, how do we want to be remembered by those who will come to see us when we're gone? How do we want them to remember us?
Hang on.
Everyday Legacy. He was a funeral home director of all things, so he knows something about this topic.
And what was his name?
Cody, C-O-D-I, Huesman, S-H-E-W-A-N.
Because I'm starting to have a few birthdays, and maybe I need to look at something like that myself.
Yeah, it's how do you want your kids to remember you, you know?
Yeah.
And I can tell you're a relaxed, happy person. But lawyers get so driven, their focus is on billing hours, winning cases, making partner, and they might miss some of those things in their life that might be more important.
Right. I can fall into that too. So, last thing you and your son, Buddy, disagreed about at the firm.
Well, we had different styles. I was organized, one might say anal. He was relaxed, one might say sloppy. And so we had very different styles that manifested themselves at different times. But it was great to work with him. It really was a gift that he actually started working with our firm when he was a junior in high school. He's brilliant at math, and he worked in our bookkeeping and accounting department, and then went to college. He came back and worked with us in the summers, and went to law school and worked with us some, and then came back with us in 2008, I think. And, it was just a real privilege to spend 13, 14, 15 years working with him one-on-one.
Yeah, that would be great. English Golden, Ellie, and Dezi.
Right.
Who's the troublemaker?
Well, neither, but I guess if there's one, it's Dezi. Dezi's still sort of a puppy at heart and a little bit playful, but neither of them are troublemakers. They're just two wonderful, same breed, completely different personalities, and a lot of fun to be with. And actually, the only trouble with them is they make me rank number 3 in my house. I answered your question accurately, but my wife would say the first thing she does is get on the floor, wrap her arms around Ellie and kiss Ellie and say, I love you. And I was like, what about me? Why don't I get some of that? You know?
That's funny. So we got to plug your podcast too. It's over 400 episodes deep on the Free Lawyer Podcast. What keeps you showing up to record twice a week all this time?
You know, Zane, it's kind of funny. I have a coach and he suggested I do a podcast. I remember it like yesterday. I remember exactly where I was standing. I said, there's no way. That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. I'm too old to do a podcast. And now, 3+ years later, I've done 400 episodes. I think it's my way of giving back to the profession. I don't have any desire to monetize my podcast, and it's a narrow niche. It's not a podcast that appeals to the world at large. If I have, 75 lawyers who hear an episode, I'm thrilled. That's all I want. And, but it's about a way to be of service. I do a solo episode on Mondays where I share my thoughts, and I have a guest episode a solo episode on Mondays, guest episode on Thursdays. And I've kept up with that rhythm. It's gotten easier as I've gone along, and I'm very happy to do it.
Well, I guess if you have 75 people that you could affect their life, I mean, that's really something fantastic.
Right. Right.
So, which episode or guest conversation changed your thinking? Or is there one or two that kind of stand out?
Well, I think the ones that probably affect me most is I've had a lot of other coaches um, who help lawyers like I do. I look at the world now as a world of plenty, a world of collaboration, not a world of scarcity and competition. I lived there for too long. I've had Heather Mulder on. She was fantastic. Rachel Clark, Yevi Chatiga. They're all amazing folks who help and support lawyers. And I always learn something new from them. Even though we do similar things, we might be in slightly different lanes, but we do similar things. And Sherry Bellitz is a trial consultant. I actually just joked with her today that I wish she was around when I needed her, but at that time she'd have been 10 years old. But now she coaches lawyers on how to try cases. And I don't think there was such a thing when I was trying cases. I was learning by the seat of my pants, learning by making mistakes. And she's incredible what she knows and understands about how to. She is a lawyer, but now she's moved into the consulting phase and works with lawyers on big cases to show them how to try them better.
So I got to make sure and get in here your website. And so if somebody wants to contact you, I just have a couple of other questions too, but I just want to make sure I get that in. So if somebody says, this Gary, he sounds terrific. I need to get my life on track here. I'm stressed out. So what's the best way?
GaryMiles.net, very easy to remember. And I'm also very, very active on LinkedIn. Easily find me there, obviously under my name, Gary Miles.
And so I read, so I mean, I do quite a bit of research beforehand.
I can tell. Yeah, tell you do.
I read that you still practice and that you sometimes will go back. And how does that all work? And do you enjoy it? And you must enjoy doing it because you don't have to do that. But
yeah, that was true until earlier this year when I went inactive. Part of it was finishing up the cases I had when I came down. Part of it was handling a couple bigger jury cases that the firm had because I tried a lot of jury cases and no one else in the firm had. And I enjoyed it at first. As time went on, it became, as my work with other lawyers built up, it became less important and less enjoyable to me, and my heart moved in a different direction.
So what do you want to do with your consulting practice? I mean, how much do you want to grow it? Or what's your goals there?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's something I have to reflect on. I've built up. I limit the number of lawyers and law firms I work with because they get 2 1-hour sessions a month, but in addition, they have unlimited access to me. I've drawn no boundaries around that except after 8 p.m. at night. Even weekends, even 6:30 in the morning, I'm available to them because I don't want them ever to feel like they're alone when they have, employee quit or something like that happens that causes them stress. And to have someone who's a partner, in air quotes, with them, who's always by their side, always supporting them, is very important to them. But I'm probably about at the max of that. So I have to figure out what my next step is. We talked a little bit before about productivity, and I'm creating an online course, which hopefully will be done in about a month. It will be 7 modules, 7 weeks, incredibly detailed, have 15 videos, each an average of 10 to 12 minutes long, coaching them through it with worksheets and so forth. And I think that's a way, if there's one operational hurdle lawyers face, it's being inefficient and unproductive. And it's so easily correctable, so easily correctable. And I hope that can fill that gap, that several hundred lawyers could use that and start to improve their efficiency and really bill more hours in less time with less stress. I worked with one lawyer personally on this, And he was working so hard, completely overwhelmed, completely stressed, completely frustrated, working 10, 12-hour days, billing 3 or 4. And he had no idea why. And after I worked with him in person for a day, then I shadowed him the next day. And he billed 10.3 hours in 9 hours and said it's the easiest day I've ever had and the most fulfilling. And that's my vision of what I like to do for other lawyers.
So when if somebody was going through your course as far as efficiency, which is different than your other services, your coaching, it sounds more like you're addressing a deeper sort of psychological, emotional thing that goes on with, or do you do both?
I do both. A large number of my clients own small law firms like I did. And so a lot of it is business consulting. How do I scale? When do I hire my next person? Should I hire a virtual paralegal or an in-person paralegal? And questions of that sort. So it's both.
So if you were to grow your practice that side of the thing, then you need to hire somebody, and then that becomes a different kind of animal altogether, doesn't it?
Right. Well, I have two amazing virtual assistants who work with me. I started using one of them about 2 years ago, and I didn't really know what I would use them for. And now it's like wonderful. They've taken so much off my plate. They're so skilled and so helpful and really knowledgeable about things I'm not, like podcast and SEO and videos and editing videos and things like that.
Yep. Well, Gary, I really appreciate